Right now, Donald Trump is stuck in a Manhattan courthouse, and the Biden-Harris campaign is taking off the gloves, no longer shying away from speaking about Trump's legal cases and ramping up a surrogate operation that will remind voters about the threat they say the former president poses to democracy. Today, two police officers who were attacked on January 6th are holding a press conference in the battleground state of Nevada, raising the alarm on the potential of political violence under a second Trump term. NBC's Mike Memoli is on the ground in Philadelphia ahead of a joint campaign event by the president and vice president. Jennifer Palmieri is former communications director for the Obama White House and Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign. She is an MSNBC political analyst and co-host of MSNBC's How to Win 2024 podcast. Great to have both of you. So, Mike, we've got some brand new reporting about how the president is expected to respond to the Trump trial. What can you tell us?
Well, Chris, the Biden team has not been shy about sharing their frustration with the degree to which this weeks-long Trump trial has not just sort of dominated the news coverage of the race, but has also delayed the process that they thought voters would be going through right now of realizing that this election is a choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. So they've done their best to try to counter-programming the Trump trial. You've seen their Wednesday strategy, an event like today's joint event with the vice president and others, targeting black voters here in Philadelphia, announcing their debate launch, their debate challenge to Donald Trump. But we're now also seeing how they plan to ramp up and engage on the trial in a way that they haven't been throughout. We were the first to report on Friday that the Biden team is preparing to lean in, potentially even call Donald Trump a convicted felon if indeed he is convicted on these charges. The ultimate question, though, is what will President Biden say and when will he say it? This is a big variable, Chris, of course, depending on what the verdict is and when it comes. The president, of course, tomorrow will be marking a very solemn anniversary, 9 years since he lost his eldest son, Beau. If there is a verdict tomorrow, it would be unlikely that we would hear from the president tomorrow. But it is likely that the president will engage at some point, and his reaction will be calibrated, we're told, based on what Trump's reaction is. Because if Trump overreacts to this, if he plays this up, as he has, frankly, throughout this process, as a rigged process, as one that Joe Biden has run through the Justice Department to target his political enemy, you will see a more forceful response from the president, appealing to the public to understand and respect the norms of this country, the process that was underwent here, and to respect the outcome. But if it's a more muted reaction, which feels unlikely based on what we've seen so far, then that will certainly be responded to in kind by the president.
Yeah,
so
I'm not sure what planet they're thinking there's going to be a subdued reaction. Come on, Mike.
But this is a moment that the Biden team has been preparing for. They want to really kick up this next phase of the general election now that the trial will be over, and to sharpen that messaging against Donald Trump heading towards November.
All right, Jen, you've been in those rooms. It's not fun, I imagine, to have these kinds of conversations. And look, I could hear an argument, and I could even understand an argument. Stay above the fray. You're not going to influence it. Let the debate, speak for itself. On the other hand, depending on what Donald Trump says, maybe a leader is needed. Some calm is needed. Also, if he is a convicted felon and we're not there, maybe you call it what it is. In either case, do you say the system has worked? What would your conversation be? What would Jen Palmieri say if you were in that room right now?
I think you have to say if he is, I think, Biden, he's been smart to stay out of it till now because they don't want to be, Trump is saying that this is all, that the Biden Justice Department cooked this up to hurt him. Also, the Biden Justice Department is pursuing a case against the president's own son. So it doesn't seem like the president is really using the Justice Department to his own ends. But you want to stay out of it until it's concluded. But then I think once it's concluded, if the Republican nominee for president of the United States and the former president of the United States is a convicted felon, the president of the United States needs to stand up and say, it would be an abomination for the United States standing in the world, for our democracy. In some ways, would make a mockery of our democracy for this man to be convicted and then elected president of the United States. So I think at that point, I wouldn't rush to the briefing room to do this. But I think that the president needs to say that in the right kind of setting to set the table for the American public treat this as the very serious matter that it is. And then the other thing that you see the Biden campaign doing that I think is smart. I mean, I don't think it's gonna, I don't think we're gonna look back on this week. It's like, oh, this is the week that they really won the election. But I think it's smart to start doing counter programming with the Jan 6 Capitol Hill officers. They had Robert De Niro at the courthouse in New York yesterday. Just to, they're not talking about the trial. They're talking about Donald Trump's lack of respect for law enforcement. They're talking about protecting democracy. They're talking about Jan 6. And that is an issue that the Biden campaign wants voters to focus on, that they want this to be a focus leading up to the June debate. And so I think it's smart to try and spin off the trial and have those surrogates out in battleground states during Trump's trial as well.
I want to go back to something you just said, which is that if he says something, it will be in the right kind of setting. We only have a minute left, but what is the right kind of setting? And is that speech or those comments already being written?
I suspect those comments are already being written. The right kind of, I think the right kind of. I don't think it should be something too formal, even though it's a serious matter. I would not. So I think you have to be judicious in how you pick that. But I suspect that the words are important. Some part of America will discount whatever the president has to say. But I think we know there are a lot of voters. There are a lot of Republican voters who've learned this in the primary that are open to voting for Biden if Trump is convicted of a crime. And so you need to look at that as part of your target audience as well as America in general. And I'm sure they're already working on what those words would be.
Jennifer Palmieri, always great to have you on the show. Mike Memoli, who is poised. I thought I heard some music playing, so the candidates can't be too far behind. Thank you both for being on the program.